Tonight on Obscured Reality, join us as we travel back in time to visit the Count of St Germain. Traced with alchemy, could he really be over 300 years old? What about people in the not-too-distant past claiming to have seen him? Let's find out. Sit down, sit back, and relax as we take you on a journey through obscured reality.
Welcome to another episode of Obscured Reality. Join your hosts, Mark and Stephanie, as they take you through a journey of the extraordinary, bizarre, and often frightening world of the unknown. Explore topics of the paranormal, UFOs, alien abduction, lost civilizations, mythical monsters, and other unexplained mysteries. Come along with us as we transcend into another dimension of obscured reality.
Welcome back to Obscured Reality. I'm your host, Mark. Joining me tonight, your co-host, Stephanie. How's it going, Stephanie?
It's going good. How is everyone tonight?
Everyone, the two of us, or just me on this side, right?
All the viewers, all 3 subscribers of us.
It's nice and rainy here, but I don't think it's raining right now, so we might get some nice rainfall ambiance.
Perfect
No way of
perfect backdrop to some spooky things.
Hey, well, tonight I was informed we're going to do the Count of St Germain.
Yes, I have lots of notes on him.
Well, you seem pretty knowledgeable on him anyways, which is good, probably unless you have to read, but I don't know jack about him. I didn't have time to do much research on it. I did skim through some stuff, and I'm kind of interested to see what you have that I didn't read, because it sounds like there's probably a lot. But just the little bit I got, he seems like an interesting character.
Oh, to say the least.
Yeah, possibly from wealth, but not positive. Quite a few aliases, possibly because of the wealth and wanting to kind of keep that quiet from his family, at childhood. But other than that, I don't know much other than he was into alchemy, some things like that. But that's my knowledge base on this. So it's good for me because I kind of get to relax tonight and listen to you, but I will be cutting you off a million times, I'm sure.
Feel free.
But I'll let you kick it off. What do we got? The Count of St. Germain.
Count of St. Germain. Let me pull up my pages, literal pages of notes. At first they were written all nicely and everything, and they started very quickly turning into my own terrible version of shorthand, which then turned into cursive, which then turned into old men's form of cursive, where it's just you can tell what the big letter is and some of other letters if it's an F or an H, but the middle parts you really got to guess at. That's eventually what my handwriting became.
Right.
There's just so much information. And I just was trying to keep up writing it all down. So I'm going to hit a couple of points. There's a lot to him, lot. So I'm only going to hit the main, most well-known things and cover a period of approximately 150 to 200 years.
Okay. Well, from what I read, if I'm not mistaken, he's made claims that he's up to 500 years old. Yeah.
Well, yes. Considering that back in, I believe it was the 1700s, he had claimed to be 300 years at that point. So that would add up.
True.
But most accounts state that he was born in the 1690s.
Yes.
Which is strange because going forward, I'm going to point out a couple of things that kind of make that a little inconsistent, but that's where the most well-known and accepted origin story begins. Now, some people believe that he could be from even earlier than that. There is a legend of that he could be a Cartphilius. Basically, it was the Jew who mocked Jesus for being on the cross and was then cursed to wander the earth forever. Hence why people call him immortal. Some people also have claimed that he could possibly be Merlin, which oddly enough, there actually is starting to be more and more evidence of a, not so much of a magician and a sorcerer, but an actual like mystic of the medieval times. Named,
that you mentioned that stuff. Again, I don't know much about him, but I did read. I'm currently reading some stuff about him, and I recall some particular names. Voltaire.
Yes, I will get to Voltaire. Yes.
Yeah, Voltaire and Transylvania, possibly where his father was from.
Mm-hmm. We have a couple origin stories on that, actually.
Yeah, and the reason I point those out is kind of along the lines of what you said. Kind of when I hear Transylvania or Voltaire, and I know nothing about Voltaire, what the hell that is or anything, but I
can't wait to tell you.
Spooky, creepy kind of background sense. And when I hear Voltaire, I think of what's it, that little mind reader guy in the thing you put quarters in at the fairs.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Damn, I have two of his little readings in my purse right now.
That's what I think of when I hear Voltaire.
I'm going to remember this halfway through the podcast. I'm just going to blurt it out, and I'm so sorry in advance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
creepy.
Yes. But just going to point out, this is probably another idea for another show, is that there is actually a lot of evidence to support that a magician, sorcerer, whatever you want to call him at the time, actually existed back in medieval England under the name of Mirrodin. So, and who knows, alchemy was a thing back then as well.
Makes me think of Merlin.
Actually, Mirrodin is the original name of Merlin. So there's that. So those are two possible former 1960s identities of many, in all honesty, but those two I just thought were interesting. But for the most accounts start in the 1690s. The Secret of Kings is actually the most well-known book of St Germain. Isabel Cooper Oakley wrote that. In it, she basically names him the son of Francis Ricosi II of Transylvania.
Yes.
There's also a possibility he could have been the bastard son of Maria Anna of Paflis, Newburgh.
Francis was a prince, I believe.
Yes, he was the prince. He was the son of Francis Ricosi II of Transylvania. That's the main popular one. They think that he also could have been the child of Maria Anna and Charles I of Spain, who, by the way, is a Hamburg. The Habsburg, that's the line. The ones with like the overly grown chins, who are like deeply inbred, like one of the worstly inbred lines of the entirely inbred royal European family. Let's see. And also there is an idea that he could have been the son of the King of Portugal, John V. So most of his life is put down in like legends and anecdotes and, basic accounts from other people. And I'll get to Voltaire in a second because he is one of the accounts, which is very strange. However, so he was believed to be well-versed in alchemy. So basically the whole idea, if you don't already know, of alchemy is to find immortality, change base metals into gold, and find what's called the projection powder, or as we know it, the Sorcerer's Stone, or for our British friends, the Philosopher's Stone, made popular by Rowling for Harry Potter. Possibly he discovered that. That might be one of the reasons why he's been seen throughout history. Who knows? Let's see. Next page.
Interesting.
He first made his appearance in the court of Versailles in approximately the 1742. He apparently had come there after learning how to make jewelry craft in the Shah of Persia's court. He was well known in science and history. He was fluent in 7 languages and then well versed in about 4 more. And I mean, and we're talking German, Spanish, French, Russian, English, and then I want to say Portuguese, but then he was also like well versed in like Chinese, Arabic, and more Eastern languages like that. Pretty impressive, especially for a man who just shows up with riches that are unknown. And
I mean, three's impressive.
Right. Oh, yeah. So now, granted, at this time, he was supposed to be, you know, in his 40s to 50s. That's what his constant appearance throughout all of the sightings of him throughout the next centuries are, is a man between 40s and 50s of medium, like, height and, you know, well built. So not so much stocky, but just like a good frame. He was a painter. He could play the violin. He supposedly was ambidextrous and could write a letter in one hand and compose a song in another, or compose a poem in the other. He brought a lab with him everywhere. No one has any idea, again, like how he has all this money, but apparently some people say that he could turn like smaller diamonds and pearls into larger ones and base metals again into gold, hence why he has unending riches.
Well, what from what I was seeing, it looked like he possibly came from royalty, and that was the purpose of the aliases, to kind of keep that hidden, more so probably keep the name and the money hidden.
Probably royalty, but far enough to like removed from the actual line of succession.
Right.
I found this on the web.
Oh, thanks, Siri. Thank you, Siri. Wow. That had been listening to me for a while. Cool.
Gotta love our electronic devices.
I
days.
set Siri off all the time on accident on my watch. So he doesn't really eat in public, but he does throw like grand parties for people with like really like exaggerant food. So this is where it starts to get weird. In 1760, in Paris, the Countess von Georgi went to a party at the Madame de Pompadour, who was, I believe, the mistress to Louis XV, if I remember correctly. She had a party, and she had ran into the Count of St Germain, and she was like, that's weird. I knew someone back in Venice in 1710 who went by the same name. Was that your father? And he said, oh no. He said, I had lived there around the turn of the century and in the early part of the decade. And now, see, that's strange to me because he was supposedly born in 1690. But he was supposed to have been the age of between 40 to 50 in 1710 in Venice. He was also between the ages of 40 to 50 when seen again by the same lady, 50 years later in 1760 in Paris. And apparently he wasn't really bothered by this. She had a memoir that she wrote this all down. And by the way, it's like a legit book. Apparently he wasn't bothered by it. And he was like, yeah, I'm old. And that was like his explanation.
I mean, you can't change it, right? So,
yeah. So, just to dot a few things that he's done in the next, I want to say, 50 more years.
Okay.
So in the 1760s, he was a diplomat to King Louis XV. So he went on like secret missions and shit and did stuff and did things for in England for obviously the king. In 1763, apparently he went to The Hague, and that's where he met Casanova, the famous writer, and he did the same thing for Germany. In 1765, apparently he went to Russia and was possibly part of the plot to put Catherine the Great on the throne and the successful, putting of Catherine the Great on the throne. 1774, he returned home to France to Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette and was the Queen's advisor. 1821, in the Souvenirs de Marie Antoinette by the Countess d'Admire, I don't speak French. She had mentioned that he had showed up in 1743 to the court and no one knew where he had came from, which makes sense because his initial debut was in 1743. But to back up a little bit, 1779, he went back to Germany, Hamburg this time, and became besties with Prince Charles of Germany. And he had announced himself as the son of the Transylvanian Prince Francis Rákóczi II, and that he was 88 years old, while still looking to between 40 to 50 years old. And so for the next 5 years, they had the best time of their lives. They were freaking besties. They supposedly spent all the time together making jewelry, playing around in his lab that he set up in an abandoned factory. Yeah. Apparently he had also like found a new way of like dyeing cloths, according to him, and that was one of the reasons why he like became friends with the prince, because I guess the prince saw that it was just like cool. But then plot twist, he dies. He dies on February 27th of 1784. He is buried a couple days later on March 2nd in Eckernförde in Germany. Now, here's where we get to Voltaire. Voltaire had once described this man, who Voltaire is also, by the way, real quick, because you said you didn't know who he was too much. It is a well-known and well-respected historian of science and like mathematics, and is a very solid witness, I guess, is what we would call him these days.
Okay.
So
Voltaire is, yes.
Okay. He had once quoted him as an extraordinarily intelligent man who never dies. Yeah, right? So if someone is supposed to have been so well known, especially even now throughout history, of being a man of great intelligence and scientific, matter-of-fact findings, for him to say something like that about a who knows who the heck he is,
right?
That's interesting to me. In 1785, he was mentioned in another book. It was a German... Sorry, I didn't write enough notes about that, but it was a German book he had also been mentioned in. In 1793, he was mentioned to have been seen by the way, the same countess from 1760 at Marie Antoinette's death. She also saw him again, same age, 40 to 50 years old, in 1820 at the death of, I believe it was a king at that time, and she had actually died 2 years after that. But she had written in her book that she had seen him probably 7 more different times than what I had mentioned, all looking between 40 to 50 years old. An idea that he possibly was over in America for the signing of the Declaration in 1775. He also has, you probably know this since you've looked up on him a little bit. He has a alias known as Major Fraser. He was mentioned in the book Englishmen in Paris, and that was published in 1820.
Okay.
His life was very much like Germain. He was very lavish. He was very rich, very intelligent. He was between 40 to 50. He had a medium build, good frame, and
the theme I'm seeing is he's always 40 to 50-ish years old.
Exactly.
Always. No matter how old he really is, everyone's account is 40
to 50 years old. Even though at this point we've now crossed 110 years from his first supposed sighting to now.
And we know lifespans back then were nowhere near what they are today.
Exactly.
Like today it's common for someone to live to be 80 to 100, which is slowly changing because of the rise in cancers. But yeah, interesting.
Yes. And then magically, poof, gone. He just disappeared. Major Fraser just was gone.
That happens when you die.
Right, but I don't know. Does this man actually die? We don't actually know. So some of the more recent sightings of him, to wrap it up real fast, between 1880 to the 1900s, he was seen with Helena Batsilivsky of Russia. She was one of the founders of theological, I guess, ideals at the time.
Okay.
She claimed that he was still alive, working towards spiritual enlightening of the West. And at one point, she had a picture taken of her in India with 2 Indian gentlemen and a white man who just so happened to be captured in that picture as the Count of St Germain. And now this is late 1800s, early 1900s at this point. Right. So The last supposedly known sighting of him was actually in 1972 with a Frenchman named Richard Chanfrey.
What year?
1972.
1972?
Yes.
I mean, we're coming right up on Bob Lazar right there.
Don't get me started on him.
Okay, so pick back up on that in a minute. I got a question. Where are we getting? Where are these people getting the info that this is supposedly this count of St. Germain? How do these people that are like what what's kind of interesting to me right now is where are these writings coming from that this person in 1972 supposedly was hanging out with them? Did that really come from that person? If so, what makes that person think this is that guy?
I think, so he was a magician, and he did do proof he is Saint Germain on French TV, where he took a piece of lead wire, did some things to it, and produced gold out of it on live TV in front of a TV set, crew, everything. They provided the lead wire, he provided the crucible and the kiln and the projection powder. And apparently after some magical scientific chemical reactions, he apparently had turned lead into gold on live TV. But he was also, a lot of people think that he was a magician, but at the same time, he was incredibly intelligent like he was. He would go to historical places and be like, oh, I've been here before during such and such reign. And to prove himself, he would tell people about the layouts of particularly not open to the public areas. But at the same time, you could always get blueprints of older buildings like that. It's public property almost, not so much property, but it's easily accessible public knowledge.
Right.
So who's to say he didn't study the layout of the buildings before going in? I do have some skepticism, actually a lot, towards this most recent gentleman, just because with the age of information and books, it's very easy to find something. And also, didn't Leonardo DiCaprio star in a movie where he was acting like a pilot and a couple other things, and he was a well-known con man in that movie? So it's not out of the idea that man was definitely a con man, but the ones previously, in the 1700s and the early 1800s, it's a lot out of the memoirs written by rich people of the time, rich bored people at the time, who are like, oh, I had such an amazing life, I have to write a memoir about it. And that was the case when it came to the lady of the one who went to Pompadour's party. Okay. So that's, I don't know, that's why I feel like I'm just kind of was it really the guy Richard, was Richard really a reincarnation, I guess, of Saint Germain? But again, the people that's where I was, the people back in the day, the lady who had written the memoir, I kind of feel there's a little bit more credibility there. Just, I don't know, I am really torn on it. The idea that he is always the same age and seems to be knowledgeable in so many things, in so many languages. It's it almost kind of peeks into the idea of time traveler, almost.
Right. And it doesn't help that you have alchemy mixed in as well as some other characters, So, here's a couple things come to my mind just throughout from beginning of what you said to now. First thing, seems like a very you hear about these people that own and run these big businesses. Think of Elon Musk. The guy doesn't stop. He's just his brain's always going. He gets minimal sleep. This is all from him. He's said this stuff. He doesn't get a ton of sleep. He always has to be doing something, which is what has made him so successful, because he's gone into all these businesses and whatnot. This guy, the Count of Saint Germain, kind of strikes me as that type of person where his brain's just going and going and going. He seems like he's got so much momentum, so much energy built up, and he's just into all this stuff, at least at the beginning, which to me could, not saying it does, but could account for, all the things he was into, music and alchemy,
languages and chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, who the hell has that much time unless you're taught those things
Well to
starting starting from the day you can talk.
Right.
If he came from royalty, which it sounds like he probably did, then it wouldn't be, beyond the norm to think they might have some good teachers to teach him different languages from as early on as they can. I'm not saying that's the case, but if that's not the case, he seems like a very eccentric person, someone with way too much energy that's just going and going and going and going. If he did come from royalty, as it's alluded to, that could account for, a lot of the money as well. And being able to do the things he's done, the traveling, I would assume a lot of that or some of that was overseas.
So,
am I not mistaken?
with the whole Declaration of Independence in 1775 or 1774, it said 75, but I'm pretty sure that might have been their mistakes. I believe it was signed in 74. It was a account by the Freemasons.
Okay.
But they didn't actually state him by name. It was just someone who fit his description, but he was part of the Masons. So I don't know. Possible, yes.
Well, there was a lot of traveling. He went here and met this guy, this king,
right? But
and
travel
then this
took forever back in those days, especially overseas.
Yeah, and that's why I'm questioning if some of that was overseas as well. We know traveling overseas was very dangerous back then. It was just something I thought of. I don't know why, how it really plays in, but it was the fact there was a ton of traveling. I would assume a good chunk of that was overseas. So I'm questioning the length of time that takes with age and all the stuff he's doing. It's kind of interesting.
Right.
I'm really curious. I'll probably have to look more into him later on, but I'm really curious where these other accounts, not necessarily where they came from, but these other people, why they're stating that they have seen this guy, how they know it's him, rather than some blow Joe looking for some popularity who's studied up on the guy. We know everyone's
I guess because he was well known throughout different I guess courts of Europe.
Okay.
And he had announced himself as the Count of St. Germain, and he just unless it's a group of brothers or something that's traveling and saying that they're the same person. It's from rich people's accounts and other accounts of biographies of famous people who have stated that they have seen him, that he had said, "This is who I am," and I guess they just went with it because he was a well-known person.
I could grow my hair out, wait till I'm about 60, and travel overseas, say to Dubai or somewhere where someone of royalty might not know too much about people in America. However, I could do some research, find out who of these royalties have been studied up on things, and hope they've heard of St. Germain, and I could go over there and save up a ton of money, right? And tell them I'm St. Germain. And I could just do so much research on the Count, and if I wanted to, if I was good at acting and really fit the role, and then boom, that person has enough money, they'll probably write about it because they want everyone to know about their life, and they're going to say they hung out with them, and it's going to seem possible to them depending on their thinking, because they're going to see or already know in the history of the Count of St. Germain that this has been an ongoing trend where he's over 100 and mysteriously pops up over here. Now he's over 200 and he pops up here. Hell, 1972 and he pops up over here. Like, it would be totally fitting, and depending on your knowledge base, I mean, I personally couldn't do it, right? But depending how smart you are, I mean, you could probably get away with it if you really picked your target.
Yes.
Well,
also, the age of information is easier now than then. So I feel like, just like Richard back in 72, it's easier to say you are when you're really not. But
of course,
it's still interesting case. Supposedly the real life myth of the immortal man.
Yeah, it makes me think of other stories I've heard of, like you mentioned, having to do with time travelers and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting how prevalent some of those stories are. And I'm not huge into those types of stories. They're interesting, but I'll usually spend my time reading elsewhere. However, I'm pretty picky and choosy when I read things like that, and it takes certain aspects in different stories for me to become interested in them. And some of them I have, because they've seemed almost as if they're very possible, like they just seem like, gosh,
have you seen the lady with the cell phone from like the 20s?
Was she walking or something?
Yeah, there's actually, I think
I
couple of different cell phone people from the turn of the century.
Yeah.
And then I guess back in the 40s, I think it was like the opening of some new bridge. There was apparently a time traveler in that picture as well.
Right.
But I'm more interested in like the cell phone ones, because it's like they really do look like they're carrying something to their face. And it's like, I don't know what kind of gadgets that they had back then. I mean, in the Victorian era, their version of a keychain was so much different than ours.
Right.
So I personally don't know enough about that era to be like, oh, well, it could have been this. Like, but to the average person, they don't know either. So we're all going to be like, oh, that's a cell phone because we're used to this motion.
Right. Well, I mean, let's use critical thinking if you want. Yeah. If you want to go on that type of video, I recall seeing it. I know what you're talking about, but let's use critical thinking here. Some common sense. If I'm a time traveler from right now, 2023, I got my iPhone with me, and number one, I would think whoever's setting this up for me to go back in time, whether it's myself or someone else, cell phones 100% useless.
Yeah.
Back then. So, there's no need to even have it. And if you do have it, there's no need to have it up to your head like you're going to be using it to call someone. Right? It's 100% useless. There's no cell towers. Number two, you're not going to have a way of charging it. So, you got to think about those things when you see videos like that, or, hear those things. And that's kind of what I think about with those is like, well, if it was other people setting up this time travel for this person to go back in time for a reason, just to avoid any type of mistake, I would ban them.
Precautions must be taken.
Yeah, I would ban them from taking specific things like that, just so nothing would happen. But then again, on the other side of that, you could say, well, who's to say that wasn't done on purpose? True.
But then again, as every movie has ever said, there's consequences to messing with the action or the things of the past.
There could be. I mean,
butterfly effect. You never know.
You also got to think about time travel. This is an interesting one to talk about with Mike. He's a little bit into that, but one of the interesting things about time travel is you can't. We have a star. We call it the sun. Oh, I see you again. we have the sun, our planet, and the sun's moving within the galaxy. Our planet is orbiting the sun. If you're not a flat earther, we're orbiting the sun. So not only are we always in a different place and time around the sun, our planet's also rotating. So that's always at a different point in time. And the whole solar system itself is moving through space. So if you're going to go back in time, let's say I wanted to go back to 1100, I would have to have coordinates of where this planet was at that time.
At the rotation, at a certain degree. Yeah.
Exact coordinates on Earth as well, to make sure that when I, pop into existence, I don't drop 10 feet into the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
That's very true. But then again, I'm also not a math person. Like, I'm just not good at it. So who knows? There may be an easy equation to figure that all out. Like, shoot. Like Einstein figured out that E equals mc squared is, the stars. So it could just be a simple equation to figure things like that out. But then again, also I am horrible at math, so I am not one to say. But I feel like if letters can equal numbers, I think there's a possibility.
Yeah. Well, so is it rumored at all that the Count St Germain possibly had any children, specifically boys?
I have never actually heard anything about that. But
I'm just wondering if maybe, if he grew up in this lifestyle of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of hiding in plain sight. Here's who you are, but let's hide the royalty. Let's hide the money so that, for whatever reason, it's not an issue for you. He's already used to and accustomed to lying, not necessarily to screw people over, but
for protection.
And I almost wonder, if he had maybe some kids at different intervals throughout his life,
that would
and
be
they happen to be
interesting.
boys, and you raise them, you raise them from birth to be like that, and train them.
Just take over the personality.
Exactly.
Kind of like the Pirate Roberts. I'm sorry, from The Princess Bride. I'm so sorry. That's the first thing that popped in my mind. Did you say?
All you out there probably know. I don't have a clue.
the Dread Pirate Roberts or something like that. But basically, it
I'm gonna have to go watch it.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah, it's supposedly he has like he's immortal and like he's to be feared, but really it's just a new person like every time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if he had some kids at every 10, 20 years, it'd be easier for him to have a kid. Of course, that'd probably wind up being with different people, so you're going to get much different looking kids. But I mean, you'd really have to get
unless
lucky.
you keep it in the family.
Yeah.
As most royals did.
Yeah, and you train them from day one so that when they grow up, they're already portraying themselves as you.
A particular way, yeah.
Yeah, that wouldn't be difficult to do. It's doable. Of course, I didn't notice anything about him having kids or even
I didn't
rumored.
either. That's definitely something I should look into, though. That's a good point.
And his lifestyle of always trying to, he keeps showing up in time around royalty. To me, that kind of, I don't want to say solidifies, but is a little more evidence of possible royalty beginnings for him. Because that would make sense. That's what he would gravitate towards and be able to conversate with on a royalty level rather than a you and me level, Yeah. But I don't know. There's a lot of strangeness in there also, which is hard to
discount almost.
Yeah, it's till we get further in science, and I mean, we're always finding things out that
We didn't know
it wasn't,
yesterday.
yeah, it wasn't that long ago where we looked out in the sky and saw stars and we're like, okay, they're stars. I thought nothing more of it. And now we know when we look out there, some of those stars are other galaxies. And yeah, I was just listening to a podcast last night, and the way they described this was they're talking about the Hubble telescope out in space, I think it's about 300 miles out in orbit. And what they did is this lady was talking about it. They aimed it at a part of the sky. It was by, I believe, the Big Dipper, where there's nothing there. It's just, she described it as a blank canvas. So if you look up there around those stars, it's probably going to be a lot of black sky, right?
Okay.
She said, but what they did is basically the equivalent of leave the aperture open for a long time and let the photons come in, let the light come in, right?
Yeah.
And then you start seeing what's way, way out there. So you're getting light from even farther back in time. And she goes, there's just gazillions of galaxies out there. She goes, they're not just stars you're seeing out there. Those are other galaxies. And it's amazing to think how many of them there are. I mean, it
is pretty incredible. Yeah.
Billions, trillions, just insane amount.
And that's just in the known universe, and that's still ever expanding as well.
Yeah. I don't think we'll ever get an answer by looking out into space as to origins, because I think it's probably growing, and not growing as in expanding, but growing as in just new things starting everywhere. How are we even going to figure out where, I mean, how do we even know that's how? How do we know there wasn't a God? Another topic, another time.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I'm not well versed on religion, but, and I don't know how it plays into a lot of this stuff, but I know it does, at least for different people. So
definitely.
Yeah, this guy's interesting. I'm definitely going to read up some more on him. I'm curious about some things.
For sure. Then we can go over our notes later on. Sounds good.
Yeah, we do like a short pickup episode someday.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Cool. Well, any other thoughts or comments on this guy?
Not really. I'm just the more I read about him, the more interesting it is. But at the same time, like there comes a certain point where I'm just like, no, like I'm kind of
it's hard to fathom.
Idea. Yeah, I really do like the idea of it being like a couple generations of a person, simply because of the things we've gone over and the consistent aging. But
right.
Who knows? Who really knows? It just there are just some things that I don't think humans as a whole are ready for. And if alchemy just happens to be that, like if I figured out how to turn base metals into gold, I would not tell a soul.
I think we're ready. I don't think it's
now, but,
Yeah,
but then again,
I
still go back. I still will say that if I ever learned alchemy and I learned how to do anything like that, be immortal or turn base metals into gold or find the philosopher's stone, I wouldn't tell anybody. No.
Or would you? Like even that one person,
maybe
stuff
a few,
like that.
But it would be one of those things that's like, if you tell anyone, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Just because.
I mean,
that's something I want to hoard for myself. Why would I want to share that with anybody?
Yeah,
greed is definitely something that the human mind is persuaded by.
Of course. Well, one other thing that comes to my mind is, how long do you really want to live? Like if this were to be true, or this idea is true, even if the Count of St Germain really only lived to be 50, 60, 80, whatever, and died. But would you really want to live that long?
No.
I mean,
all your loved ones are gone at a certain point, and it's like after that, it's just going through the motions, I'm assuming. Yeah,
and the only way that would be feasible to me to want to do is if you popped up in different time frames like this guy did, because everything is so different.
Yeah.
But then again, how if you did pop up from, let's say, the 1600s to 1972, you couldn't just jump out there and go meet royalty and fit right in. You would have to live completely secluded, so nobody knew that you were a weirdo just because you're different from their time. And you would have to study as much as you can into these people and their culture and become them, so it's your normal everyday life, which is going to take a lot of time before you could really go out and join with other people and not be crucified,
Yeah.
It was a much different time period back then.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
people would get killed for a lot less than they would nowadays. So
Very true. But
I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm going to look into them more. I'm curious.
yeah, no, that's kind of my final thought on that, is that if I was in his position and I really did figure it out, I'd hold that to my chest for a very long time. But again, there comes a point where I'm like, I'd probably be bored and I'd probably not want to continue.
Yeah, it all depends what you could do. If you could travel to other planets and stuff, that'd be great. But then again, you'd want to know that there's a breathable atmosphere, food and water.
Right.
And no illness. One thing I think with time travel, I always hear people saying, I'd like to go back to the time of Jesus and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there thinking, what would you do in the land he came from, looking so different from those people? You know that you look at somebody the wrong way back then, you're dead. Like, would you really want to? You'd have to have cloaking technology to do that and stay alive.
The cloak of invisibility.
Yeah.
Pull a Harry Potter.
You'd be beheaded or stoned in 2 seconds.
Oh, witch.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you weren't claiming to come from the future, you just showed up. You'd
be so different. Even if you
done.
try to dress the same, your mannerisms and everything would make you stick out. Absolutely.
Even if you were the same race, the same culture, same everything, even if that lived on up until today, you'd still be so much different. That the feasibility of staying alive is very low.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Cool. Well, that was interesting. Maybe we'll do a pickup one on this one sometime. I definitely want to look more into him, so I think it might be good.
For sure.
To get some ideas from Mike too. I think he'd be good on this one too. So all you guys out there, like, share, subscribe. Don't forget, if you have any weird stories of your own, Bigfoot sighting, UFO, UAP sightings, aliens, anything that's happened to you, shoot us an email, obscuredr1@gmail.com. Put story in the subject line so we know what it's for. And we are going to catch you on the next one.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check back with us often for new episodes. Feel free to drop a comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Obscured Reality.